Hey, picture this, you've just moved into a new house, you've got a garage that doubles as a workshop, and the backyard is big enough to hide a whole set of tools. You start thinking about security, but the idea of splurging on a system that ends up being a nightmare to set up or, worse, sends you constant false alarms feels like a gamble. That hesitation is real, especially when you're looking at a 16-camera package that's not cheap. If you're on the fence about whether a full-blown Lorex 1080p HD 16-channel kit is worth the investment, I've walked through the whole thing, checked the app, tested the motion alerts, and talked to a handful of folks who already have one. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the biggest question most people ask is, do I actually need 16 cameras? The answer depends on the layout of your property. If you have a 2-story home, a side yard, a detached garage, and maybe a small storefront attached, the 16-camera spread gives you the flexibility to cover each entry point, the driveway, and the perimeter without leaving blind spots. For a typical apartment or a condo where you only need to watch a front door and maybe a balcony, this system is overkill. In those cases, you'd be better off with a single or dual camera kit that's easier to hide and cheaper to run. Installation was the first hurdle I expected. Lorex ships the cameras with PoE power over Ethernet adapters, so you need a router or a PoE switch that can feed both power and data through a single cable. That means you're pulling Ethernet through walls, which isn't a DIY nightmare but does take a Saturday morning if you're comfortable with a drill and a fish tape. The good news is the cameras themselves snap onto the mounting brackets without any fiddly adjustments, and the metal housing feels solid enough to survive a tumble or a gust of wind. Once wired, the system powers up, and you're greeted by the Lorex Home app. Now, about the app experience. This is where a lot of security kits stumble. Lorex's interface is straightforward enough that you can add cameras, name each zone, and set motion rules without scrolling through endless menus. I was able to assign the front door camera a high sensitivity setting while dialing back the driveway cam to avoid alerts from passing cars. The downside is that some of the deeper menu options feel a bit hidden. If you're hunting for custom notification schedules, you have to tap a few extra layers, which can be confusing the first time around. Still, once you get the hang of it, the app runs smoothly on both iOS and Android, and you can pull up live feeds or scroll through the 2 TB NVR storage with just a swipe. One of the standout features that justified the price tag for me was the active Deterrence LED. When motion is detected, the camera flashes a bright white light right where the movement occurred. In practice, that does 2 things. It scares off an intruder who might think they're being watched, and it gives you a clear visual cue in the video playback that something triggered the alert. I tested it on a nighttime delivery driver. The moment the light kicked in, he stopped, looked up, and then walked away without leaving a package. It's a subtle but effective way to turn a passive camera into something that can actually influence behavior. Low light performance is another area where Lorex tries to earn its stripes. The 1080p sensors, paired with infrared LEDs, give you a surprisingly clear picture after dark. Faces are recognizable enough that you can tell if it's a neighbor or a stranger, and the color night vision, the camera's switch to black and white when it gets really dark, still retains enough detail for you to see if a vehicle's headlights are on. The only caveat is that the infrared glow can be a bit harsh if you're watching the feed up close, but that's more of a visual quirk than a functional issue. Detection accuracy matters a lot, especially if you're sensitive to false alarms. Lorex markets advanced person/vehicle detection, and in real-world use it does a decent job differentiating between a human walking by and a car rolling down the street. I did notice a few pet false positives. My cat triggered the garage cam a couple of times when she leapt onto a shelf. The system lets you set zones where you can lower sensitivity or even disable detection altogether, which helped me mute alerts from the backyard where wildlife is common. If you have a lot of pets or small animals, you'll want to spend a little time fine-tuning those settings. Battery confidence isn't really a factor here because the cameras draw power from the PoE cable. That means you're dependent on the network staying up. A power outage will knock the whole system offline unless you have a UPS for your router and switch. For most homeowners, this is an acceptable trade-off for a wired system that never needs to have its batteries.